Hello, and thank you for joining us here today for the Most Attractive Employers Index 2021. My name is Orla Moran and I'm General Manager of IrishJobs. Compiled by Universum, which is a part of IrishJobs, the ranking represents Ireland's most comprehensive and robust talent survey of professionals working in Ireland today. Over 11,000 Irish professionals working in business, IT, engineering, law and natural sciences shared not only their career motivations, but also their expectations for their working lives. They also named their employer of choice, which is the basis of the rankings we will present here today. Every year, we see changes in the needs and priorities of the Irish workforce, reflecting the evolving nature of people's lives as they respond to new trends, challenges, and opportunities. COVID-19 has seen this process accelerate, and as a result, many professionals are now reconsidering what they want their working life to look like. Our research tells us that over half of all Irish working professionals are interested in changing employers within the next 12 months. So, as employers gear up for what experts are referring to as the Great Resignation, understanding the motives and priorities of the workforce is key to attracting and retaining talent. I think we can all agree that the current recruitment environment is unprecedented. The research we will discuss this morning will shine a light on what talent wants now from employers. It will also provide you with rich, actionable insights to shape and inform your talent acquisition and retention strategies over the coming year. Joining me today to take us through the rankings, the data, and the trends are Steve Ward, UK and Ireland Business Director for Universum, and Sarah Brewer, Marketing Director for IrishJobs. So what can you expect from us over the next 90 minutes? In a moment, I will hand over to Steve. He will take you through the data and reveal some of the key trends they have identified from this year's research. Then we'll move on to the winners. Steve will reveal the 2021 professional rankings for employers recruiting in business, engineering, IT, natural sciences, and law. We'll also be speaking to employers who have excelled in this year's rankings and hear how they have achieved such phenomenal results in such challenging times. Throughout today's webinar, we have a team available on the chat function to answer any questions or queries. You will see that chat box on the bottom of your screen. So let's get started. Steve, over to you.
Hi, thank you all, and hey everyone, good to see you. I'm just moving to sharing my screen, so hopefully you can see that nicely now. So as Orla has mentioned, obviously we will walk through the most attractive employers in Ireland based on research. I'll walk through the detail of that a little bit later. I'm also just going to skip through a slide here that just does exactly what Orla just did, which is introduce the three of us who are involved in this webinar today. So look, let's as we walk through today, we're going to look at a little bit of Universum's data. So obviously this rankings are taken from a deep piece of research we do annually into what talent wants and what they need, what their drivers are. So we'll have a look at some of those kind of key insights and trends. We're also going to then look at the winners in each of those groupings that you see there: business, engineering, tech, health and medicine and law, as well as natural science. A little small focus on female talent and who's performing well in team and female talent, and then a little bit of a sort of conclusion and how we press forward from here. So look, let's look a little bit very quickly. Actually, I don't want to go into detail too much on this. Who are Universum? Universum is a world-leading insights and data-driven led employer branding agency. So as an organization, we help employers understand the needs of talent through our research, and that therefore shapes employer brand development and communications planning into creative activity. So we are what will be known as an end-to-end employer branding agency. So that's our world. We do it for those of you who are involved in a very global capacity. We do that research in 41 countries around the world, and that gives us really rich understanding of different local markets. But of course, today we'll be focusing on the Irish market specifically because that's why you're all here. And this is the research that we conducted at the start of this year, so the back end of last and the first sort of 3-4 months of this year. We delved into the minds of over 11,000 professionals in the the Irish marketplace. This is professional research. This is research that is done with people who are no longer in education, but are now in employment, stretching from 17 years old to probably about 70 is the oldest one, potentially. So, so a real good mix and blend we'll walk through as I walk through some of the trends and some of the highlights. So looking at the trends, so what I want to focus on, we've taken a few little areas to subject areas that I think will hopefully be interesting. The first one I want to look at is what are the general profession preferences. And now there's a structure that we use. For those of you who have watched this before or spoken to Universum before, you'll know we use a benchmarking process to measure employer brand perception, because one of the biggest challenges in employer brand is measurement of the employer brand. Often we use digital performance, which is fine, but that's also a measurement of recruitment marketing. But ultimately, the measure of employer brand movement is through the change in the perception of employees and candidates and people to your employer brand. So we need to shift perception. So we use this super deep 40 drivers of employer attractiveness. This is a benchmark that's used by most of the largest companies in the world and some of the smallest ones as well. And it is there to give us a really good, deep, nuanced idea of what talent needs from a year-on-year basis and a corner of experience basis as well, and when looking at things like male and female talent as well. So really deep exercise. So what are the differences? Now we've had a pandemic, right? And in the last year, when we did the professional research a year ago, we were right in the midst of the depth of the pandemic, although trying to sort of come out of it. And a year on, looking at the research into 2021, we wonder what has changed. So let's look at which of the ones have moved the most, because typically we don't see enormous movements in these, because on the whole people have a good consistent idea of what it is they're looking for. The nuance just changes a little year on year. But what we can see here in the research from 2021 is a couple of things significantly going up. And this is the business professionals we're looking at here, and a couple of things going down. And it's interesting this year that amongst business professionals, respect for people is the one that has really grown. Last year, it was the 7th most important driver in choosing an employer. This year, it's the 4th, and it's the biggest mover amongst this top 10. And what it tells us a little bit about is that people are looking for, want to be appreciated for who they are. And I think this comes from a pandemic year where we understand people's relationship with their employer actually got very strong last year, and we enjoyed being listened to, we enjoyed being cared for, we enjoyed this, and it set the tone as to how we expect to be treated. The irony, of course, this year is that we've seen the Great Resignation. I'll look at the Great Resignation shortly, which implies that actually maybe some of that trust has been lost, so that maybe we haven't been respecting our people. But talent is looking for signs, particularly in business here, is looking for signs that people respect their employees. Friendly work environment, little jump there, nothing much there. The ones that dipped a little bit, no terrible surprise really on flexible working conditions, in the sense that it's become a little bit of a norm. I think people expect this now. They don't demand it, they kind of expect it. It's pretty much advertised quite regularly in people's in work structures now. The other one that dropped quite a bit is professional training development. Quite a surprise actually. That's normally a very high one. But I think right now, in a post-pandemic or a pandemic recovery scenario that we're in right now, some of those luxury items are not right to the fore. We'll see this in some of the trends as we walk through other sections as well. Next, we see engineering. Just looking at engineering, let's start to see a little bit of a trend, because once again, we see respect for people making a big jump, and we see secure employment making a jump. No real surprise really in this particular year that secure employment is something that companies the employers are looking for more, both from inside and outside our organizations. They want to know that they're going to join or stay with an organization that gives them security in this scenario, particularly when members of our family have maybe lost their jobs or gone on furlough or moved out of their careers in this last year. The need for some stability in those who are holding key roles within the family is going to be pretty important. The droppers here are actually friendly work environment, kind of not terribly surprising in a sense that people aren't thinking about the work environment quite so much, because of course they're not in the office so often any longer. However, I do believe we still a top 10. It's still 6th. We need to understand, what does this mean in a hybrid work environment? And once again, we see that flexible working trend dropping. That's not to say people don't want flexible working. It's just they're starting to find some other things that are influencing their decision making when it comes to the workspace and their work and their employer. And then we look at a couple of things here. Now, this is interesting, right? Year after year after year, engineering talent has always demanded employers who are evolving, who are looking forward and innovating all the time. And you can see here in 2020, innovation and embracing new technology was 4 and 5 in the most required or most demanded from engineering talent. In 2021, they're gone. They're out of the top 10. And you can see here, I've added a little bit of texture to that by the fact that they've reduced in last year, 43% of people said it was one of their key things they look for an employer. That's reduced to 34 for innovation. And then the embracing new technologies has dipped from 45 to 35. And this is really fascinating for engineering talent, because in a market like Ireland, which is so heavily in engineering, and there's a big employment status of engineers in Ireland, some of the things that maybe traditionally the stories we would have told might not resonate as much as we used to. We've got to look at this as a sort of a symbol, as the kind of things that people care about more. Maybe the talk about innovation and technology is not a 2021, 2022 subject. Maybe we need to think about how we nuance our engagement there. An interesting one that came into the top 10 on the left-hand side, you can see there, is inspiring leadership. Now, again, that's something we don't normally see in the top 10 in engineering professionals. So very interesting one. Again, it goes a little bit for that respect for people element and that security of employer, by looking for an organization that they feel as though they can trust the leadership and be inspired by the leadership. We'll see some evidence of this a little bit later. And this is tech. Tech that very similar to similar things going up. Respect for people and secure employment really jumping up. Secure employment has been one of those things that for tech has never been one of the biggest factors, because people have erred toward startups, emerging companies, etc. in the tech world. We're seeing that change. We've been seeing it now for probably 3 or 4 years, that tech talent is less driven by the passive and dynamic environment of working in a startup for a year or 18 months, and now is much more driven towards more established organizations and organizations that provide that level of security that means that they can build a career in tech, rather than just a collection of experiences that maybe the Gen Y audience of tech led towards. The new generation seems to be looking for different kind of attributes. So that's the tech professional preferences. Let's look at the way in which male and female think differently. And what we're looking at here is the percentage difference between male and female in some of those 40 attributes. We're looking at the ones that are the highest on each side. Ignore the fact it says negative on the left side against female. Unfortunately, that's a glitch of the graph that was used to show this. What this demonstrates is, what this means is, looking at the top there, flexible working conditions, which ironically we just saw in the top 10. So it's not being everybody's most attractive thing any longer, but still up there in the top 10. Well, you can see where the demand for flexible working conditions is. It's with women, 21% more than men. So that's what this is telling us, that women choose flexible working conditions as deciding factors to join an organization 21% more than men do, significantly greater than any other attribute. So again, I think we start to understand about what's happened in the last kind of year or 18 months with regard to family responsibilities, etc., and how that's probably impacted females more than males. I think we know that to be true. But we also see on the left-hand side a lot of focus on the sort of the ethics and the D&I elements and the responsibilities and the respect for people. Very much drivers that women care about in their employment. And then the bottom on the right, we see men focusing much more on performance, market success, high levels of responsibility, etc., prestige of an employer, and that kind of stuff is more in tune with what men. And what this tells us about employer branding communications is we can't just broad brush communications. We have to think about how we engage female talent and how we engage male talent differently, and understand the different drivers that we need if we're trying to present a balanced workplace, because one size doesn't really fit all when it comes to male and female. Just quickly over engineering, similar story, but actually interestingly, the one in engineering, so if you can't quite see that because of slight overlap in the graphic, that's 23% of people, 23% more requirement for support for gender equality in female versus male in engineering. And I think this just probably tells us a little bit of a story about engineering being probably one of the industries that has had the hardest time balancing what traditional male-led environment and moving it into a slightly more balanced environment. Women are looking for it. They're trying to find evidence that they're going to be okay there, and then they're okay to work there, and they succeed there. But again, similar to what we just saw with business, a lot of the other areas are much more of the human elements around the organization that female look for more. And at the bottom, we see a lot more of the very similar areas around men, much more around career, impact, innovation, etc. So it's again, great symbol of how different the audiences are and how we need to respect that. And likewise, very quickly, there's your tech ones as well. We see quite a similar kind of thing. All of this data will be shared with you afterwards, these slides, so you can pick up and have a look at this information in more detail afterwards. Quickly, I want to look at the Great Resignation, and more than tackling the whole subject of the Great Resignation, because that's something I did with a Universum webinar last week that you can collect from the Universum website. But what I want to look at is the thing to blame. Effectively, it's been used in the press. If you do a search on Google for headlines around the Great Resignation, what we see a lot of is remote working being the reason why. We're sending people back to work. Oh, we didn't really think about it when we sent people back to work, etc., etc. Well, it's not just about that. Great Resignation is about, and the reasons why people are leaving is not the act of going back to work. And I'm going to show you why. Because when we ask talent, professional talent, people who are in the workspace, if you are asked to go back to work, if you find yourself in remote working situations, what are your concerns? Now, at the bottom, you see there are a few people around there who are just not concerned by any of the above. 21%, I think it is down there. They're not concerned about this. They're fine. They're all good with working from home. But as you can see, 44% of people feel they miss out on social connection. They're concerned by being isolated, by being on their own. So well-being comes into play. The need for human engagement comes into play. So that's quite a big negative. But possibly even bigger negatives combined are the two below around, but my employer might have a bias for in-person workers, or working remotely might mean I'm left out of more important meetings or initiatives. So the first one talks about our fear of isolation, our fear of missing out on some of the human social play. Those second ones look at the challenge around bias. And this is something as organizations we've really got to address in our communication, and the way in which we present remote working. What we're assuming too much, and Universum land, we always teach people not to assume, because use the data to understand the truths. What we're assuming is that everybody would rather just work from home and just have it sort of what's regarded as an easier life, not having to commute, etc., etc. But there are worries about working at home. There's a feeling of loss and bias against them from working from home. So we cannot just say that the Great Resignation is because we're all going back to the office. It's much, much more than that. And I will go back to that thing earlier around respect for people, that people actually, it's not about the fact that we need to go back to work. It's about it's how we made people feel when we told them they were going back to work. And I think a lot of the challenges, and as well as the changing circumstances of all of our lives, of course, that are affecting change. But let's not just pin this on remote working. There are actually a lot of reasons as to why people are looking at the Great Resignation, resigning and thinking about their new lives or whatever. But a lot of this comes back to where did we let the employer down? Did we change their status so dramatically that we forgot to care about the anxiety effectively of the hybrid world, or what it means to go back, what it means to stay at home. So we need to just think and listen really well. Very quickly, just a little bit of differences between senior professionals and young professionals. Some of those concerns are more prevalent amongst young professionals, particularly around the social connection, very much around some of that bias, and very much around earning potential and thoughts that they're not going to get the same opportunities as other people. And of course, we have to look at the very simple things in the such as at the bottom one there, the arrowed ones, my internet connection will not be good enough. And many young people in our workplace don't have strong internet at home, or have to share internet, and it worries them. It worries that they might be affected in their work by that and their ability to perform. And then there, very quickly, there's your male versus female challenges. Going back to the, we shouldn't assume things. I actually genuinely, that one at the top there, I would have assumed it was men who would have missed the social engagement more than the females. You know, I thought they would miss the, you know, the camaraderie and the beers after work, all those kind of traditional things. I was wrong. You should never assume. This demonstrates that women absolutely quite a bit more than men are missing are feeling the isolation and missing out on the social interaction with co-workers. So think about these things. This is really, really useful data to give us a real good understanding of the impact of hybrid, remote, and back to office working. And then just a quick one on this. The signs were there at the start of the year with our research, and when we conducted this research, 55% of all the professionals, this is across all the talent groups, are looking to change their employer in the next year. 1 in 2 of your employees is looking to leave. Doesn't mean they will leave, but there's a high probability they will under the current environment that we exist in. We need to stop and think about this. What it means as well is we need to be also sharp about our talent attraction capabilities, because if people are considering a new career, we need to understand talent to be able to understand why they're making a move. What is it they're missing out on? What is it they're gaining? That's where Universum's data is so handy. And then we can start to pinpoint targeted messages in targeted zones to the right talent with the right tone of voice, etc. That's going to create the magnetism, because people are being a little bit more, as we know, are being a little bit more selective about who they choose, where they apply, etc. because of course of the lack of trust that's occurred in the last year or so. And I do want to look quickly at women in STEM. We did a little bit of a study on women in STEM as well, because I think just to tell a little bit of a story about the way in which we do employer branding, if you like, or we do recruitment communications to women, and thinking about attracting women into those areas where we saw there's some sort of discrepancy. I talked about the fact we need to nuance between male and female. Well, I'm going to make it even harder for you now. I'm going to tell you, we also need to think about how we consider different priorities in the career stage of female talent, because what we see here across these 3 blocks is the sort of people right at the start of their career, women in STEM at the very start of their career, then the sort of young professionals in their 20s, etc., as they're climbing their career a little bit and developing their career, and then we see the 8 years plus experience bit, which is kind of in that 30. But from a simple perspective, probably that stage where family starts to become a more important thing, and therefore we start to see different drivers. But what this tells us again is we cannot do broad communication. Great example of this, for example, is look at number 6 in the first one: clear path for advancement. They want to see a career in front of them. You come out into an organization as a young professional, you want to see a career ahead of you, and that's the same for male talent, it's the same for female talent, and it's clear here for STEM talent. And then as they come into their young professional career, continues. It's number 7 this time, but it's still a career element, and they want the training, the development. They want the career is still very much there, but we're starting to see work-life balance start to come to the fore near the top. We're starting to see areas around flexibility and things like that starting to come to the core. So we start to see this intersection between the career growth drivers, but also the lifestyle drivers starting to intersect in the middle. And then by the time we get to the sort of STEM talent in their 30s, and what we start to see is, in fact, that, clear path for advancement disappeared out the top 10. The career bit actually dropped a little bit. It wasn't as important at that particular stage of their careers. And actually what we're seeing is a lot of leans towards an ethical, strong, purposeful, secure environment. And so what are we providing for our 30-something plus female STEM employees? How do we retain talent through this area? Well, we need to think about what it is that we are offering and sharing and supporting our employees with, because it's actually quite different to their life in the 20s. It's very different. Their expectation is different things. Again, this will be shared afterwards. You can look at that in a little more detail afterwards. And here's another interesting thing that joins up. I'm going to join something up with this and to kind of allay some fears and worries that we have sometimes as employers and employer branding people and talent acquisition people. You can see here there's a big salary. And it starts right at the stop. We've got a massive salary disparity for women in STEM versus men in STEM. Starts at 11%, it kind of, in that middle period, it goes into that kind of similar area, 11 points. But then once we go past into that 8 years plus experience, the men accelerate, the women, whilst they do accelerate on average, don't accelerate at the same rate. The career is still happening, the development of their career is still going, but it's not accelerating at the moment. And there's two ways to look at this. One, we can look at that and go, it's a problem. It is a problem. We are still driven in the STEM environment by male leaders and male leadership, and not enough balance in the female workplace. But the bit not to beat ourselves up too much about is remember what the last slide showed us, that actually women in STEM, when they reach a certain age, are less driven by career. They're driven by some other factors. Not every woman wants to go to the top of the chain. Equally, neither does every man. And I think what we need to just remember is there are nuances of demands for talent when they're in that sort of, you know, beginning parenting kind of years effectively, and start to build family, etc. The demands of talent changes, and our importance of our career changes. And this demonstrates that maybe it could demonstrate the glass ceiling exists, but we've also identified potentially that women are not quite as concerned about the career structure at a certain point. So let's not beat ourselves too much about it. Just be aware of it, understand the different drivers. I think what we can often do is read newspapers to decide our employer branding strategies. Sometimes we've got to look at the data to decide what the best approach is. I'm just going to skip that one a little bit. This is the difference to the female versus male, and it's 52% of women in STEM are looking to change their career in the next year. So a little bit of lack of settlement in this crowd as well. Same for men, 50% for men as well. So so a little bit of something on women in STEM. And then very quickly, I want to just drop a couple of slides around this very interesting. We looked at the people who ranked the commitment to diversity, who expect and demand or desire from their employment a high level of commitment to diversity and inclusion and gender equality, and the other areas around this this sort of general disparity. So what we do is we picked out the people who cared about this the most versus the ones who didn't. And I want to look at resilience. Look at the skills, the people who care about D&I as a deciding factor as to why they join an organization, which therefore by proxy, they are more likely to be impacted by a D&I policy. They're going to look for a D&I policy. When we ask about their skills and their attributes and how they rate themselves and their capabilities in certain areas, there's a lot of, they rank higher than the larger workplace. They are more resilient. They're more engaged when they're helping people. They tend to take initiatives to make things happen. They find it easy to learn new skills, more so than general talent. I feel confident with challenging problems. I tend to challenge the status quo to create new things, much more. So what we're seeing here is a very progressive workforce in people who respect D&I. There is a horrible, I was interviewed earlier this year after a student by somebody on radio who called them the woke generation, which I absolutely detest the phrase, woke generation. This is just people who are aware of life and are aware, but it doesn't make them flaky. It makes them strong. Look at the people on this graph. So when we talk about data to tell us that diverse workforces and diverse thinking creates a more dynamic, more resilient workplace, then this is some really good clues as to absolutely proving that point. And equally here, they're also a more settled and content workforce. This is also described by the fact that they have more organizational trust in their ability than those who do not. So it's a very interesting study. Again, you can look into detail a little bit later. I don't want to go into this too long because we need to move on to the awards. But and then just again, more for your reading afterwards. This is a demographic mix of people who value D&I more versus those who value it less. Left-hand side, we see the obvious one is 60% female, 40% male. As we saw earlier, female talent is much more conscious and aware of the needs of a diverse workforce and more equality inside an organization. So look, that's a bunch of insights. Hope that was really useful, interesting stuff. Lots of stuff to chew on and think about, and hopefully take into your kind of thought process and something to look at afterwards as well. Now let's look at some winners. Let's find out who is been doing well. Let me invite Orla and Sarah back onto screen to come and join me as our resident Irish experts too, because you probably might have noticed I'm not Irish. I'm the odd one out here. I'm the English person amongst the crew. But Orla and Sarah are absolutely in the midst of the marketplace and absolutely in the midst of the trends with Irish jobs. So obviously we're very much part of this research and as a partner and as our sister company. So let's start to look through. How are you, Orla? How are Sarah? Good to see you.
Hi, Steve. Good to see you too.
Steve.
Good. Right, now let's go. So let's go into the first section, which we're going to look at. Now, just to outline the methodology here that we do. How do we identify an ideal employer? Well, what we do is for every professional, once they categorize themselves as an employer of a certain field of expertise, whether it be engineering or business or science or whatever it might be, we'll say, oh, you're in engineering, right? Okay, here's 150 companies or thereabouts who are prominent employers of engineers within Ireland. Which ones do you recognize and which ones you're not? They click the ones they recognize, the ones they don't recognize the name of, they go, don't know, they leave those and they get removed from the survey. Then we present the remaining ones to them and say, right, of the ones you recognized, which are the ones you consider working for? Which ones do you think are an attractive employer? And so they tick the ones they think they regard as quite good employers, and they ignore the ones that they would rather not. And then we start to go into our insights with them, et cetera, et cetera. And then we go to them and say, right, of the ones that are left that you consider as an attractive employer, we want you to choose five employers that are your ideal employers to work for, the ones you absolutely would love to work for in your field the most. And all the accumulations of all of those top fives accumulated across the 11,000 people who completed this survey create our rankings and awards. So that's how we find them. So it's people's choice. No company paid to be as part of this rankings, etc. This is organic research, and it's not judged by disgruntled people grumbling on Glassdoor or something like that either. This is people who with independent thoughts and independent scenarios judging companies with no particular bias or experience to enhance their bias. So very organic, very real. And we're going to start with business. So we're going to start with the business professionals as the first kind of group. So with the business specials here, we'll just let's go move my drink out of the way because I can't see on the screen. So this is the 20 to 11 here. So so we're starting to look at the top 20 here. Really good moves. You can see Heineken just jumped in there a little bit. Good little moves there for Johnson & Johnson. I've got to say, Angada Sikshana. Sheer got it wrong. I've been practicing all morning. I still got it wrong. But there you go. Pfizer, really big jump, really big jump as well. No surprises with Pfizer, and we'll see a bit of a trend of that as we go through some of this. But let's look at the top 10 a little. So here we see, Irish Distillers at 10, good move. Microsoft at 8, really good move. Couple of dips in there, but good moves as well for Diageo and Apple. But some good big moves there. I mean, Sarah, tell us a little bit about Irish Distillers. That's a really great jump on their part.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's great to see Irish Distillers move up to 8 places to enter the top 10 this year. And it's great news for an Indigenous Irish company as well. I have noticed that Irish Distillers have really raised their employer branding online over the last year or so. Before then, they were kind of under the radar. It's been somewhat overshadowed by their consumer brand, Jameson. But I guess the corporate brand is Irish Distillers.
Yeah.
It's meant to be a fantastic place to work, so I believe. So it's really good to see them raising their profile beyond their product or consumer brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, having caught up with them recently, it's incredible to learn how low their attrition rate is, how many people stay and build a career in Irish Distillers. Absolutely incredible stories from inside the organization as to how they do that. So yeah, absolutely agree. So looking into the top 3. So really big move for Amazon. What do you know of that, Orla? Why are Amazon jumping up so much this year? Tell us a little bit what's going on in Ireland with Amazon.
Yeah, so Amazon are very much expanding their footprint here in Ireland, Steve. They had a jobs announcement at the end of last year, and then they had a further jobs announcement this year at the start of February. They're going to be opening up a new 60 million euros fulfillment centre out in Baldonnell. So I think that's good news for people who've been missing their Amazon delivery since Brexit. I know certainly my door has had less careers since Brexit with Amazon parcels. So yeah, the fulfillment center is expected to help them bypass Brexit delays. And then I think from an employee perspective, Amazon are seen as a very, innovative employer here. I think just from hearing about them, they seem to offer very good salaries, and it seems to be a company that's full of opportunity as well. So I don't think there's much not to like about the opportunities at Amazon.
Yeah, it's great in employment, isn't it? And a really important time for employment. And I think as well, I think Amazon, we all know, I mean, particularly in the world of employer branding, went through a period maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago where they were getting a little bit of bad press, and it wasn't so strong for them. And I still get people talk to me about that now, go, oh, Amazon, that was 6 or 7 years ago. They're, as an organization, we know them very well in Universum. They are going great guns in improving the way they look after people and reward people. So I think that's really good to hear that splashing into to Ireland as well, because hopefully they'll be a fantastic employer for Ireland as they continue to grow. So good stuff from them, jumping into the top 3, really big, significant move. Number 2 is, so this is the civil service. This is the government departments generally. They've stayed at the same place in number 2 as they were last year. So still a high propensity to want to work in the public sector amongst business professionals, which I think is really, really great in the balance of all this, because we also see health service executive there at number 4, as well as a very high employer and highly attractive employer in this area. But who are the winner? Google are the winner. So well done to Google, who maintain this. Google haven't necessarily had great jumps in all of these areas, but actually they've stayed at the top there. Still a super attractive employer as ever. But I think we can see there are probably some companies going to try and challenge Google over the next kind of year or two. So stay on your game, Google. It's going to get competitive. So that's business professionals. So let us look at the movers and shakers, the ones who are making the biggest moves. As you can see, there's a couple of new entries into our rankings there, with PayPal and Heineken doing really, really well. And as I alluded to earlier, Pfizer, a big jump there as well. But Sarah.
Yeah, really interesting.
Went from 23 to 15.
Yeah, and Garda Síochána.
Thank you.
Yeah, really interesting to see them move up significantly to 15th place with business professionals this year. I think they've performed really well in the IT rankings as well, which will be coming up shortly. I put this performance down to another pandemic hero success story, to be honest, Steve. Yeah. It's really fascinating to see the rise of the purpose-led organisations in this year's report. It seems that everything that Garda Síochána were doing throughout the lockdowns has paid off in terms of professionals viewing it as an attractive place to work. So everything from policing the stay-at-home order, protecting the public against cybercrime, and there's been a lot of that around lately, as we all well know, as well as simply putting a smile on people's faces with some of the drive-by birthday parades. So they brought the personality of the guards to life a little bit. And of course, we can't forget the guards dancing to Jerusalem, a song all over Ireland as well. And I actually checked it on YouTube yesterday, and it's had over 1.9 million views. Wow. So all in all, there's no surprise that their employer brand is on the rise. So big well done to Garda Síochána.
I think it's really good, because it's always, these sort of organizations there's always a bit of bitterness against this sort of area, isn't it? I think it's great when you see that genuinely there is an attraction to work for this sort of organization. And I think it comes back, if you look back to those attributes that are popularity, things like the security, and I think with regard that it to be a very secure place to work, I would say. So yeah, no, it's great news. I know you talked about the heroes of the pandemic heroes, and of course that's probably, well, not probably, an absolute reason as to why Pfizer are jumping in popularity of business professionals, people wanting to potentially move to Pfizer, which is incredible. Yeah. Let's look at engineering. So well done to all those, and let's move on to our engineering. So a little glance at the top 20, or the 20 to 11. Again, we can see quite a bit of movement, and I think, as I alluded to earlier, with a pandemic, we do see lots of change. It's probably more change than ever amongst some of the top 20s because of different feelings about their employment choices and who they trust and who they don't trust. And again, we see public sector doing quite well in this little grouping here as well, with the health service exec and the Department of Education. So little alternate routes for people who are in the engineering career, I would say, in some regard there. We see Medtronic doing extremely well as well, jumping up there. But let's look into the top 10. So on the top 10, what we see here, again, Amazon continuing that trend that we just saw a minute ago, big jump into the top 10. Stryker, who we saw earlier this year, making a big jump in. I mean, tell us a little bit about, am I going to? Yeah, you're going to mention Striker, Orla? Is that
That's me. Yeah, that's me,
you're
Steve.
talk
You're
about
right.
Striker, aren't you?
Yeah. So yeah, do you know, it's very interesting to see the popularity of Striker, because when we did our graduate rankings back in May, they also appeared on the list as well, very high up the ranking. So it's no surprise, I think, that they're on the professional rankings as well. They are one of the world's leading medical technology companies, and they have won lots of awards in the States. So if you look at, even I had a look at their company bio on IrishJobs, and they've won a huge number of awards. So just to give you a flavor, they have won awards for the best employer for diversity, the top 100 companies for remote working, actually, best companies for women, best companies for multicultural women, and overall they featured in the 100 best companies to work for. So yeah, they seem to be doing really, really good things.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we had, you're absolutely right. And I always remember one of the things when we spoke to Eileen from Striker in the period for the student rankings, the equivalent webinar that we did, they talked a lot about their inclusion strategy and the way in which they're approaching their brand and their communication to talent, and they care massively. They really do. And I think they've got some positive stories through the pandemic as well, which I think is, again, helpful in this particular journey, that's for sure. So no, really good. And then we've got civil service again making a little jump in the right direction. Intel making a good jump in the right direction as well. Intel, for everybody, for those who aren't aware, are about to go through a big journey of growth in this next kind of year or two. So again, they're going to become an even more significant Irish employer. And again, engineering is very central to that. So again, good for them that they're right up there in the top employers. So then we've got, let's see who's at number 3. So number 3 is ESB. Well done to ESB. They dropped a place though, so we've got some movements here. We've got some movement in the list. Then we've got number 2 is Jacob Engineering, making a good jump in the right direction, jumping into that top 2. In fact, I mean, not even just top 3, but into the top 2. And oops, I've gone the wrong way with my finger. There we go. And the winner there is Pfizer. So well done to Pfizer, as no terrible surprise to find them having a really good year in regard to their brand, given everything that's done, and to jump at the top of this particular grouping. But I want to flash back to Jacobs a second, because on hearing of their kind of jump up, we caught up with Nicola Culligan. Nicola's the senior TA partner at Jacobs. So I caught up with her the other day to have a chat through what it is they've been doing and congratulate them for jumping up in the awards. Or do we? I'm wondering if I have to stop sharing to allow this to happen. Hi, Nicola, thanks for joining us, and well done for you and your team. And Jacobs in Ireland rising in the rankings in engineering from 4th to 2nd, which is an incredible move. So congratulations. And how does that make you guys feel?
Thanks very much, Steve. Yeah, we are absolutely thrilled to jump from 4th up to 2nd. I mean, like 4th place last year was incredible, but to be number 2 this year is, yeah, it's phenomenal. And that's a hard word for me to say. So yeah, we're absolutely.
It is a hard word to say. Very good, especially on a recording. Yeah, look. So I mean, tell us a little bit about the last year for Jacobs, and you I mean, there's some special things you've been doing in this last year that probably have kind of helped this, because it's obviously been a bit of a crazy old year, right?
Yeah, you're right. It was a crazy year. It's still, we're getting back to normal now. Like, we're back in the offices. They're open, both the Dublin office and Cork office are open at 50% capacity. So people are coming back in, which is great. But thinking back over the last year, I can't really, pinpoint anything in particular, but we have kind of a real focus, and especially last year as well, on inclusion and diversity strategy. Yeah. So we've mandated we have to have diverse interview panels. Also as well, onboarding remote candidates last year, it's very, very important that we get things right, and and for candidates to feel welcome from day one. So we made sure their laptops were sent out, headphones, all ancillary IT equipment, so they're ready to go on their first day. So that's, you know, fantastic achievement by the HR department and also IT as well, and facilities. So they did a fantastic job in that. Also, we're offering part-time roles in all our vacancies, so that encourages returners to come back, you know, women coming back off maternity leave or people with caring responsibilities. So we're offering that flexibility in all our vacancies as well. Yeah. We also introduced some software that we put our job descriptions in, and it's a gender decoder type piece of software. So, and that's helped kind of reshape and reword our job description. So that must have helped as well. So, yeah.
And just to give you a little bit of another extra snippet when I was looking before we caught up, in the amount of people that chose Jacob as their ideal employer in Ireland, it was 14% men and 11% women. So it shows that actually it is, you know, reasonably even in an industry where you probably wouldn't historically been as that balanced effectively. So that's obviously showing some good signs about your work.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And just kind of on the graduate side last year, so the intake they've just started in September, we had 52% females, a female intake, which was, it's great. Yes, that's really good to hear about the 11% women.
Yeah, no, it's really good. No, it's very much almost on a par, which is amazing. Yeah. So what's after this sort of year, what's the plans for Jacobs over the next year or so? What are the big focuses going to be for you guys moving forward in your attempts to get to #1 next year?
That's a great question, Steve. I think just more of the same, but, you know, bigger, better, bolder. I think our Irish people in Ireland as a whole, we don't tend to kind of shout about our successes and kind of blow our own trumpets, but we absolutely should. We've got a great story to tell. I remember about 3 years ago, it was just when I started the interview process to join Jacobs in Ireland, and the VP at the time said to me, he said, you know, Jacobs in Ireland is the best kept secret, and I'm delighted to hear that, you know, we've jumped up to #2, so we're doing something right. Yeah. But hopefully, you know, next year or going into the end of this year and into 2022, hopefully COVID will be a thing of the past. You know, we're getting back into the offices. I traveled out to the Cork office a couple of weeks ago to do some face-to-face interviews, which is brilliant. Yeah. Back here, I'm in the office today. And people are coming back in. So hopefully just more of the same, but still keeping a very, very strong focus on our I&D strategy.
Brilliant. I like the idea of bigger and better and bolder as well. I think that's the way to go. It can tell employer branding person. Tell the world you're awesome. It's the way it should be. But no, clearly, I mean, you guys, I mean, obviously this has been fantastic. You've done so well. It's a great recognition. Like I say, it is maybe less of a secret than you think it is, maybe. But when you're saying, remember, this is professionals as well. So there's people who know the workspace, etc. So I think this
is and it's such a competitive category as well. So.
Kidding, right? Absolutely. So look, really well done, Nicola. Lovely to catch up with you. Good luck for next year ahead, and say congratulations to the rest of your team as well. Thanks for being with us.
Will do. Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye bye. All right, back to hold on. Let me find my screen to share again. I've got to do a bit of digital gymnastics when we do all this. I feel sorry for anybody doing an interview with me, because they're not only interviewed by my words, but they're also interviewed by my hands, which is because I'm a hand talker, so I tend to be. But yeah, really lovely story of Jacobs, and it's so nice to be able to share with them actually that for an engineering, we just heard earlier about the challenges in engineering with regards to, you know, female engineers wanting certain things, etc. Jacobs clearly as an employer are demonstrating that, because they are almost as equally ranked in women as they are with men, which I think is really impressive and untypical of organizations like that. So let's move on. Thanks, Nicola, for your time with us there. And here are the movements. Excuse my typing. I just realized I've got engineering GP professionals at the side there. I could have pretended it wasn't there, but but unfortunately my typing on the left there was a bit clumsy. But right, so look at the big movers here. Medtronic, Regeneron. We've got some new entries here, etc. Orla, tell me a little bit about these sort of companies, Regeneron especially. They've jumped in this area.
Yeah, I might actually just talk about Regeneron if you don't mind, Steve. Yeah, it's great to see them entering this year's rankings with professionals. I think they've been in Limerick since about 2014, and they had a big jobs announcement last year with 400 new jobs coming up at Regeneron. That will actually bring them to about 1,400 people employed at their industrial operations and product supply facility in Raheen. And I believe in order to make their space in their New York facilities to accommodate their COVID-19 efforts, they needed to ramp up their capacity in Limerick, which is a huge boost for the Limerick region. So a big well done to Regeneron coming in fresh there at number 30 this year.
Really good. And then we also see health executive making a jump in this area as well. Again, obviously health service executive will have had a great year. We'll learn a little bit more as we move on. But I put the KPMG one in here as well, because it's super interesting. That's a really significant rise from a company that wouldn't normally be associated with engineering talent. But what it tells us is a little bit of a story about the way in which companies such as KPMG, and sometimes in the banking fraternity as well, there is a goal to slightly diversify the kind of people that populate those organizations now. And this is a good recognition that actually they're talking to the right people in the right way and engaging people that probably wouldn't traditionally be KPMG's target audience. So I think I wanted to put that in because I think that's just something to congratulate them a little bit on that kind of noticeable move that that's just maybe the beginnings of a bit of a change of see in the way that engineers think about finance organizations. IT and tech. So we move on to IT tech, another massive area in Ireland, another massive industry in Ireland, given all the companies that are in there and all the companies that are developing and growing in Ireland. So when we look inside the first section, the top 20, we can see a few movers there. PayPal, as we mentioned earlier, have come into our ranking list this year and jumped in at number 17, which is really good. Enterprise Ireland, really good jump for Enterprise Ireland as well, into 16 there. Pfizer, bit of a bonkers jump in that one. The huge jump, but again, their popularity is huge, and therefore their appeal amongst the tech audience is clearly down to that relevance and relevant society right now. When we jump into the top 10, so what we've got here, look at the movers. So let's look at you can see a couple of the bigger companies taking a bit of a hit. But what's jumping out at me is the public sector companies in Ireland, HSC especially. Orla, tell me a little bit about HSC and technology. How does this all come about, do you think?
Yeah, isn't it very interesting to see the rise in the public sector rankings? Like that's 4 organizations listed there in the top 10. And it's probably attributed, I think, again to the pandemic and the proactive role that many of these organizations have played, as both yourself and Sarah have alluded to earlier. So yeah, I think another thing as well is, I think there's probably now after the pandemic, I think there's probably a lot of tech professionals that probably feel that maybe technology now goes beyond just products or services, and they want to maybe make a more kind of measurable positive impact on the world now. So definitely seeing that mindset shift for sure in the rankings this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And on guard, Shauna.
There you go.
Sarah.
You got it.
and I can imagine them pretty involved. I mean, it sort of goes a little bit more hand in hand with technology now, doesn't it? Really, in that area around cybersecurity. Is that what you see?
Yeah, I think it's definitely with the Garda Síochána, I think it's definitely a sign that IT workers are probably anticipating the growing role in cybersecurity there. And so yeah, really great results for them this year in this year's rankings.
Yeah, and it also links up to one of the things that we noticed in some of the data as well, and something that's certainly been sharing around the fact that there is an increase, and the pandemic does this a little bit, but it's the increase of appreciation of Irish organisations as well. It has grown in this year. We've seen this stress towards companies that have originated in Ireland or Indigenous and Irish organisations. So I think that's this is a really great sign of that when you look at those big boys that are suffering alongside those 4 public sector companies. So I think it's probably a little bit indicative of that. But I love your thought there, Orla, about the fact that technology is not just products and services anymore. It's public service now, isn't it? We're all I mean, over in the UK, we've got the NHS app. I'm sure you've probably got the HSE app or something in Ireland. And all of a sudden, they're right at the forefront of technology, aren't they? All this kind of stuff. So I thought that was a really good observation on that. Well, let's look at the top 3. So who's in the top 3? Number 3 is Amazon, who are growing everywhere this year, is definitely going in the right direction. Just a little move for them though this year, already recognized as a good tech employer, just jumping into the top 3. It looks like they've replaced Facebook by the look of it, given Facebook dropped to 4. Number 2 is Microsoft, holding their own at number 2 in the same place. And the number 1 company, I don't think there's any great surprise here that tech and Google go hand in hand together, really. So well done to Google again for
Well done.
for getting the number 1 spot again. No real surprise. Let me reiterate something I always say though on Google. It can be very kind of like, oh, it's tech, it's Google, it's always Google. But actually they really, really care about every little detail of how they communicate, what their message is year on year, how they embrace talent and engage talent. So there's no complacency with Google at all. They are right on it. No real surprise really, but the reason they stay up there is because they never ever stop trying to evolve and think about how they best care for talent. So very, very good. The movers and shakers. So we've seen here. Oops, so I need to click on. Oh, hang on. Oh, it's there. Yeah, cool. Sorry. So we've seen again PayPal, as I mentioned. Irish Distillers, obviously, we caught up. We mentioned them earlier. They've had a massive jump with tech professionals this year, which again just must be strength of brand, local brand that's helping them there, which is great. Pfizer, of course. But I want to look at Central Bank of Ireland, who because this was a really good jump, and it's not just the only area where CBI have done very, very well. But to sort of see this and see some of the other things that were in their research, I caught up with Erica Skelly, who's a senior talent acquisition manager at Central Bank of Ireland. And so over to our, I'll stop sharing, and then we'll go to the interview that I conducted a couple of days ago. So hi, Erica, thanks for joining us, and want to say a big congratulations for Central Bank of Ireland's performance in the Irish Most Attractive Employer rankings this year. You have gone up in business, in engineering, and in tech, and also in sciences this year, which is a phenomenal performance for Central Bank of Ireland. How does that justify some of the stuff you've been doing? How does that make you guys feel?
Yeah, thanks very much, Steve. No, we're absolutely thrilled with the elevation in ranking this year. And it's very much as a result of significant efforts by the talent acquisition team here in the Central Bank and our communications division, really to strengthen our employer brand in an increasingly competitive and candidate-driven market at the moment. Really, despite the challenges presented by remote working since the onset of the pandemic, the Central Bank has continued to run a significant number of campaigns and programs throughout 2020 and into 21, and really aimed at hiring diverse talent. So we've also continued to proactively enhance our hiring and selection process to ensure they were as inclusive as possible, and we reconfigured our recruitment process to a remote platform, ensuring that the candidate was at the forefront of consideration right throughout the recruitment journey.
Very good. Yeah, because I was going to say, what sort of things have you specifically been doing? Because to have such a rise in certain areas, would you put it down to that kind of approach to a slightly more wider, diverse pool of talent? Was that the plan really through this last kind of year or two to kind of develop that area?
Well, we haven't really, in terms of doing anything specific. So we've continuously recruiting in the IT space, but recently we ran a large scale IT campaign that was very successful. But the results really showcase how our employer brand has strengthened more broadly in recent years, and it's due to a number of initiatives and approaches that we've taken. So over the last number of years, we've revamped the entire career section of the Central Bank website into a careers hub, essentially. So what does that do? It's helping us to build a strong employer brand via engaging, informative content and integrated recruitment campaigns. So our targeted campaigns, as we call it, are for very niche skill sets, and that encompasses our graduate program as well. So that's designed so that potential candidates can understand who we are, what our values are, and how their objectives can align with ours. So our recent IT campaign encompassed strong, authentic imagery and text, and engaging and user-centric content to really set the Central Bank apart from some of our competitors in that space. But in addition to that, our employer brand has improved significantly thanks to our website, our social media engagement, and our overall brand strategy. Each year, we ring-fence a number of roles in our graduate program for individuals with disabilities. So we work in conjunction with the WAM program or Willing Able Mentoring program to ensure the inclusive recruitment process for these roles, and that enables candidates to perform to the best of their ability. The Central Bank was also awarded a WAM Leader Award in both 2019 and 2020. And we've just been advised that we'll be actually recognised once again this year for our work with AHEAD to promote the employment of graduates with disabilities by facilitating WAM placements. So our overarching aim throughout our talent acquisition strategy is really that diversity inclusion lens, and it's very much an, all encompassing and bringing a number of threads together.
Yeah, really good and super stuff. And just as an aside, actually, one of the things I was just looking at before we caught up on the phone, looking inside our measurement, the Universum measurement of 40 drivers of employee attractiveness. I was just looking at Central Bank of Ireland's. I'm just looking at the business professionals here, but by the recognition of business professionals in Ireland, Central Bank of Ireland is the most associated company in Ireland, ethical standards, would you believe, as well, which is amazing. You are like #1 ranked for that particular attribute. Now, given how hard it is to impress people with ethical standards, that is amazing. And you're also #2 ranked for social responsibility as well. So some of the things you've just talked about there really come through in the way people are recognizing Central Bank of Ireland. So that is really, really good. It's clearly working well. What's about, I mean, obviously we've had a kind of a bonkers sort of last year or so. How is that leading into, I mean, what are the plans sort of going forward, back end of 2021 and going into 2022? Are there any sort of adjustments that are happening with regard to talent attraction, or what's the sort of story going forward, Erica?
Yeah, so we've had lots of successful engagement with career seekers online and through the online channels and through social media. But there is space to build on that absolutely in the future. So we'll be adapting a digital first approach moving forward, where there's less of an opportunity for in-person contact. We really hope to get back to a place when the pandemic subsides, where we have that face-to-face engagement, which is really fruitful and so powerful. And we continue to supplement this with digital content in the meantime, and engagement across current and potentially new social media channels over the next few months as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, I mean, clearly you guys have done, it's always quite nice. Sometimes banks don't always get the best rep when in these rankings, and you guys are clearly going in the right direction, which is really, really good. So well done, Erica, and your team and colleagues, etc., on achieving this significant growth. You're definitely regarded as one of our movers and shakers in the rankings this year, and congrats on doing so well with some of those attributes, which are the positive attributes to be known for in the Irish market, that's for sure.
Thank you so much, Steve. We're absolutely thrilled, and we look forward to elevating that even further next year.
Good work. Thank you very much, Erica.
Thank you.
Okay, back in the room. Right. Thank you, Erica, for that really good interview and a really good story of what's going on at Central Bank of Ireland. Like it a lot, and particularly it's always nice to be able to tell people some of the bits underneath the surface of the rankings as well. It just sort of reminds everybody that we've got all of the brands that are in this, everybody you've got in these top 20s, etc. We've got a little bit of data underneath. We've got all sorts of goodies under the bonnet of how your brand is perceived, and what people think of you, and what male talent thinks of you, and what female talent thinks of you. So some really good little nuggets under the bonnet, that's for sure. So always nice to share a few of those when we can. So, excuse me. Now, you'll have noticed a continuity error in that one as well. I had a different color shirt on. I wrecked it. So wrecked the whole. We're done. Now,
I don't think anyone would have noticed, Steve, until you flagged it.
I know. I just couldn't. I was desperately. I was conscious of it the whole time. It was. Right, so natural sciences, let's look into this one now a little bit. Again, just a quick glance at the 20 to 11 there as well. We see some really good jumps. I mean, I think Musgrave, a really good jump in a positive direction for those guys there. Excuse me a second. Oh, crikey. And Regeneron, as mentioned earlier, jumping into the top 20 as well here, which is fantastic. And GSK having a good little move as well as Abbott, a company that Universum knows well. So yeah, really good little bunch there that gives us a little bit of a sign of the top 20. And then we move into the top 10, and we see the health service executive going in the right direction, which is really great again. And we then we see MSD moving in the right direction, which is good, but also really good jump from Johnson & Johnson. Orla, tell us a little bit about how you see this rise happening.
Sorry, Steve, I was stuck on mute there. Yeah, big congratulations to Johnson & Johnson. That's a really good move up the rankings. And I think, you know what, overall, I think the pandemic, it's been a very interesting time, I think, for pharmaceutical companies in general, because the public is very much listening, watching, and reading what they're doing. And I think they're probably paying more attention to kind of pharmaceutical and drug development than they ever have been before. So yeah, very well done to Johnson & Johnson. They're a huge employer here in Ireland, and they're very much recognised for their, their innovation here. And I believe you've an interview as well coming up with Anya O'D, which will give us greater insight into why they've done so well in this year's rankings.
Yes, indeed. My colleague Carolina last week caught up with Anya to talk through, rather like the others, to kind of get a little feel as to how they feel about having done so well in the awards this year.
So, hi everyone. Today I'm really excited to have Anya O'D, who's the Talent Acquisition Manager for J&J Ireland, with me. Hi Anya, I'm so happy to have you on board today. I just want to say congratulations on the performance this year. I mean, J&J has been ranked amongst the top 10 most attractive employers in 3 main fields of study, so 3 different categories, which is almost unheard of. It's really, really good. So I just want to, ask you, how does this make you feel, and then the whole talent acquisition team feel? I'm sure you must be really stoked about it.
Yeah, no, Carolina, thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting us. We're really thrilled to be here. Super excited that result. I mean, we couldn't have asked for anything more. I'm really thrilled for the team. I have an amazing team supporting all the businesses in Ireland, and it's lovely to see it recognised, and they're going to be thrilled as well, when they see the results revealed. So we've kept it as a surprise for them as well. But equally, the business, are going to be so pleased as well. We work really closely with them. It's a great collaboration. They're very supportive in everything we do. So I'm really delighted for everybody concerned.
Yeah, no, it's well deserved, absolutely, considering everything that you've been doing on your end. But considering, these past 12 months or so, it's obviously been a bit of a crazy year with the global pandemic and people being in for the furlough. We're going in and out of lockdowns, and it's been a lot of uncertainty, right? Do you think there's anything specifically that you have done at J&J, any campaign or initiatives or messages that you've gone out with that has resulted in this really positive acknowledgement from the audience? So what do you think?
I mean, we've done a lot of big campaigns on on all the social media platforms, but I think specifically J&J as an organization have been really supportive from a well-being point of view, and they have done an awful lot of really good works for employees, especially those working in the workplace and those work from home as well. So there's been a lot of, I suppose, exposure from that point of view, and then we've really leaned into that as a TA team, and we've been, I suppose, very supportive of candidates and really trying to dial into what does the candidate want, what suits them. We've been super flexible about, when we're talking to candidates, how we approach them, and really leaning into, well, if that suits you, well, that's what's best. And we've been really honest with, when we're engaging with people, because people have found it quite tough over the last year as well. Sometimes it's a really hard decision to leave your current organization. But we've given people time and space, and we've been so honest about what it's going to be like, in the new world. And we've onboarded people remotely very successfully, which can be quite a challenge because it's hard to get a feel for the culture. So I think that's made a huge difference into how open and approachable we've been as an organization.
I think that's a very valid point. I think that's also something that we're seeing in our studies, and when we talk to different companies, that just the importance of being empathetic and showing that you have that human side. It's so important today. You're not only a cold company, you're something more than that, right? You're an employer who cares for your employees. That is something that I think will be incredibly important, or have been important over these past 6-12 months, that will continue to be so in the future. And that goes both for professionals and students. So I think that's spot on. And as we move forward now and head into 2022, and obviously there will be a lot of uncertainty and changes that we cannot predict at this point, but what will be your plan moving forward, in the end of 2021 and moving on in 2022? Anything, you have in the pipeline that you would want to share?
Yeah, well, we have a couple of things going on, but I mean, one pretty big thing, which we're very, very lucky in Ireland, we're part of an EMEA team, and our EMEA team has a big rollout branding project, employer branding project for the coming year, and Ireland is going to be part of that. So that's one big thing we'll be involved in. We're really looking forward to that. It means we'll have increased exposure on all the social media platforms. But for the team here in Ireland, we'll continue doing a lot of the same in terms of how we engage with our candidates, and how we really lean in to see what they want, and also take the feedback. And we're constantly asking for feedback. Every candidate gets a survey to see how they feel at each stage of the process, and we really take that feedback on board. And we get an NPS score from this, and we we measure it, we feedback, and we really try and reinvent ourselves as well where needed, and really take that feedback on board to make us, I suppose, better at what we're doing. There's always room to change, but so hopefully we'll have a very successful year again this coming year like last year. So we're really delighted with the results.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you will. And I mean, that sounds like a great initiative. I would say internally that candidate experience is so crucial, especially when you're in that very delicate phase, when you're talking to candidates and you're having interviews and stuff. It is a two-way street. You want to hear what the candidates are thinking as well, and incorporating their feedback into your employee journey, right? So I definitely think that's a great idea. But yeah, thank you so much again, Anya. It was great having you on board. And once again, congratulations on these, massive results. It's really, really well done to you and the rest of your team. And you should be really, really proud and shout it out loud to the rest of the team.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and thanks for the opportunity. It's really super.
Of course. Happy to have you anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See, let me share back again. Yeah, thank you, Anya, for joining us for that. That was fantastic. And one of the things that made me chuckle a little bit, nothing to do with Anya, it was Carolina, my colleague, who's Swedish, who's also lived in China and Singapore, but now for the last 18 months in the UK, using the phrase, "You must be stoked about that." That was like,
I thought the same.
I was like, that was pretty impressive for a Swede. That was brilliant. It's so acculturated. It's brilliant. So yeah, really well done to Johnson. Thank you, Anya, for sharing your thoughts. That's fantastic. And let's look into the top three now. So number 3 is Kerry, who were number 1 last year. Kerry have dropped off the number 1 slot this year. So who's going to jump up there? This is what we need to find out. Number 2 is Glanbia. So well done to Glanbia for jumping into the number 2 slot. And then number 1 for natural sciences professionals. Maybe some people might have guessed it, given what we've seen already, but well done to Pfizer for jumping to number 1. Probably no real surprise in this particular area, given everything that Pfizer has done over the last kind of year or 18 months for us all along the way. So yeah, well done to all of those moving in the right direction up there. So let's move on to the movers and shakers within this big group. And we saw something a little bit earlier in the top 20. I think there's a few newies there. We see Regeneron jumping in, AbbVie jumping as well, GSK doing well. But Musgrave, really, really big jump in this kind of area. Sarah, tell me a little bit about why do you think this might be the case? Why natural sciences, which is so much about food technology? So I guess a lot of it's got to do with that.
Yeah, they've performed really well in this year's ranking, Steve. Moving up 20 places to 19th place is quite remarkable, really. We also saw them earlier performing very well in the business rankings, moving 3 places up to 16th place. I believe they're actually the only food retailer in the top 20 for natural sciences. Again, I think it's down to another purpose-led Indigenous organisation performing well this year. I would put their performance down to clear commitments to Ireland Inc. and supporting Irish food suppliers. That's performed very well for them, as well as their CSR commitments and their community support in general. Again, another organisation who've led the way in supporting communities when the pandemic hit. I think they were probably the first retailer to get a TV ad on air about health and safety across their store network. And probably remembering back to then, it was just all the food retailers that were on air at the time. But I think they were also very clever and quick to mobilise their GA sponsorship and getting GA clubs around the country to help the elderly with their grocery shopping, if you remember that, Orla. But they've also got a very good, long-standing reputation in the country as being a good and fair organisation to deal with and to work for. So a big well done to Musgrave Group. They're doing the right stuff at the moment.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, really well done. And like I say, it was a big competition in that kind of space now. So again, maybe this was the year when a company like Musgrave stands ahead of its competition because they know how to respond to the pandemic and understand people and the environment. No, really good. So well done to those guys. And let's move on to health and medicine professionals. The last kind of couple here, we're just looking at the top 10 of these because there was a slightly smaller data set of responders because they're slightly more niche areas. But for the benefit of those who love a bit of news in the health industry, there's your top 10. Well, we're looking to find out who's near the top here because we've got a bunch of drops down this kind of list. In fact, actually nobody between 10 and 3 has moved up apart from Layer Healthcare, who are obviously associated with this industry, jumping in number 4, which is very good. And then at number 3, we've got VHI Healthcare jumping in at number 3 as well into this area. So well done to VHI for jumping in there and doing so well. Number 2 spot is Pfizer. They're not number 1 in this one. They're number 2, which is exactly where they were this year. But of course, the people at the top are the HSE. So well done to the HSE. Orla, tell us a little bit about, tell me a little bit about the HSE and what they probably stand for really over this last kind of year or so, which has increased their popularity, by the way. 55% of health and medicine professionals chose HSE as their dream employer, one of their dream employers.
Isn't it great just to see them though there at the top of the rankings, just given all they've done for us since the pandemic. So I think certainly that's a team that should be definitely celebrating seeing the rankings this year. So I think it's absolutely fantastic. And particularly when there's such a demand for medical staff. And not only medical staff, because I know on IrishJobs they've a couple of hundred jobs actually advertised across multiple disciplines. So they've actually lots of opportunities, even if you don't have that medical degree. So really great to see them there. They've done such a huge amount for Ireland and the Irish people. So a big boola bus. I think as well, you see VHI there are new in the rankings, and they've actually come in very high up the rankings, given that they're new. And I think just looking again on IrishJobs, I went to have a look at what the reviews say about VHI, what it's like to work there, and really positive reviews from employees. They talk about excellent training that's provided. There seems to be great team camaraderie as well. I kind of picked that up from the reviews that I was looking at. But I know as well in IrishJobs ourselves, we actually are members of VHI, and they have provided us with absolutely fantastic health and wellness webinars throughout the pandemic. So it's been really well received by our team working remotely in IrishJobs and helping people to manage, the stresses of working from home and, advising people how to really look after their health and wellness. So I think well done to VHI there as well. So yeah, excellent results.
Absolutely. And just going back to your thing on HSE about the fact that they are clearly employing people from across the board from a point of view of skill set. Therefore, it's also great then to see that they've risen in everywhere, haven't they? All the areas we've looked at today, HSE is right up there near the top. So really good news, great story. Thank you, Orla, for that. So let's look into law and the top 10 for law. A lot of movements around the law, as you can see. There we go. We've got HSE again, jumping up in there as well. So if they've got some open jobs in law, they are attractive to law professionals, would you believe? So it's and I think what we see here actually quite a bit interestingly is quite a jump in some of the corporate law companies with the likes of Apple jumping and Amazon, as we know, kind of jumping in the right direction. So maybe some law professionals are leaning towards the thought process of going into maybe corporate law. But then when we look into the top 3 a little bit, we get some more signs, because number 3, same as last year, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So it's that specific area. So that was a particular area of choice for law professionals, which is very good. In number 2, keeping the corporate thing going, but Google up there in that one as well. Still see them as a good law destination, but the number one, and just staying at the number one really, and it's kind of no surprise really, if it's the Department of Justice and Equality, but it goes back again to that public service element around law, and the balance we find when we work with law companies around law talent is that balance between deciding what is your message. Are you doing law because you want to do it for public service, or do you want to do law as your kind of a career law with some one of the law firms, and so or in corporate law. So we see the balance between the two there of big corporate companies and also the civil service holding strong as well, the public service end of the law. So well done to the Department of Justice and Equality in being at the top there. So that covers the main categories of the various professional areas of expertise. Just a quick glance at the ones that have done the best amongst female, just focusing on the three bigger sets, which is the business, engineering and technology. And we see here not huge movements. What we, on the whole, I think what we see is probably the likes of, I think, Central Bank of Ireland, higher in business with women than with men. So good example there of the Indigenous company doing well with female talent. But you can see that at the top of it's a Google always get it right with female talent. They've always been really good at attracting female talent. Again, they think about it, they care about it, it's super important to them. So we see some really good players, but with some familiar names that we've seen across the thing. Engineering, as we know, tough area. Engineering, as you can see, Jacob's right up there as we identified, but alluding to a little bit earlier to the conversation we had about Stryker earlier. Stryker are doing even better with women, actually, to be fair, as well. So Stryker in number 6 there, and then some companies at the top there who traditionally are strong in this kind of area: Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Google, and Boston Scientific, who in some areas haven't had as good a year this year with regard to the ranking, but still very much appreciated by female talent and female engineers, which is good to see for them and probably encouraging for them. And technology, again, not loads of differences, but jumping in from where they weren't in the top 10 earlier. Salesforce, more appreciated by women than by men, I believe. And so it is interesting, certain companies that have a slightly more appreciation, but once again, it's Google who top the pile in technology, as well as some of the other big players that we expect. But HSE, as we see, relevant in all of those areas. Number 3 with business, number 9 with engineering, and number 6 with tech. So well done to the companies really doing some good work attracting women. Again, if you wanted to find out more about the way in which women look at talent and look at employers, then do drop me a line. I again, treasure chest of all that kind of stuff, if you're trying to understand. So that wasn't supposed to be there. That is supposed to be there. Thanks for Orla and Sarah for joining me for that little period, and your insights on the local market. Super useful. Appearing on our screen at the moment is a bit of looking forward, really. Like, I mean, thanks for having us today. Thanks for going through all this kind of stuff. You've heard from Orla and Sarah around IrishJobs. Here's a little bit of Universum as well. There's and how you can engage Universum, everything from the top right hand corner, the communication strategies, and targeted methodology of communications, etc. Bottom right, looking at things like EVP, creative output, design and development. That's our area as well. And we've talked a lot about our insights today. Our insights is the foundation for everything. It's where all those rankings come from. It's where those thoughts and trends are talked about. All our insights are available, obviously, to buy. I would like to say they're all free, but they're just not, because it's super deep information. But it all comes now. We used to do this in PowerPoint reports. It's all now in our online platform Access. So if you want to have readily available access to talent data in Ireland or any other country for that matter that your company might be associated with, or where you want talent you want to be understanding, then our local our online platform is where all the data is held. Lots of lovely graphics and nice clean ways of understanding your marketplace, but also comparing yourselves to your competitors and your appreciation versus theirs, etc. So lots of ways to engage with in Universum, from data through to creative delivery, employer brand. So thank you very much for that. Thanks for everyone. Like I say, hopefully that's been a super interesting kind of hour and a half for you. That's if you want to contact me afterwards, you can. Hopefully next year we'll be back to doing this in the real life, in real person, with a drink and all that kind of stuff, and a tux or whatever. But for now, thanks for joining us for the digital ones that we've had over this last couple of years, because that's been the way it's had to be. Hopefully 2022 will give us a lot more opportunity to be in person and enjoy these awards and the best of our social capabilities. So thanks for everyone. Thanks for your time. Thanks, Orla and Sarah, and take care and see you all soon.